Welcome, everybody, to Catch's second Lunch and Learn event. We are so glad you've joined us and our guest, Kelly Scafidi, today. I'm Amy Oberholzer, the Executive Director of Catch. I'm very happy to welcome Kelly Scafidi, licensed clinical social worker and developmental therapist from Sound Mind Counseling in Glenview. Many of us know it's very difficult to parent a child struggling with their mental health. And sometimes it's just as hard to manage the fallout within the family, to know what, when, and how to communicate productively with siblings and extended family members about what is happening when mental illness gets in the way. Kelly is going to help us, and she will share tips to navigate difficult family dynamics so that everyone thrives despite the challenges. I welcome Kelly Scafidi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Amy. Thank you to Rachel, for Julie, for putting this together. Thank you to Catch Community Action Together for Children's Health. This is an absolutely crucial and imperative topic to talk about for your child's mental health and family dynamic. I am Kelly Scafidi, social worker, and this hopefully will be a great opportunity to provide possibilities and strategies to help and support an education for families on how to communicate better and more efficiently. This is a topic that is true to my heart, very near and dear, something that we deal with on a personal and professional level every day throughout our life. And I'd like to really share my experiences, my trials, my failures, my errors with you over the past life lessons learned and all of the personal and professional relationships that I've made over the years in providing services for families. So about me, I have experience as a social worker in outpatient clinical settings, working with adults and women and males and pretty much everybody in the outpatient clinical setting. I've also worked in inpatient settings at Cook County Hospital, which was an interesting adventure in itself. And I've also worked in community mental health agencies. I've been in private practice for over 5 years now. And before that, I was an early childhood education teacher before becoming a social worker, and other different odd jobs that have helped kind of build that social work character include nannying and bartending. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that reading people situation that really help kind of that overall social work aspect. So I'm hoping that this presentation will be able to provide some ideas, some support, some strategies to better understand how families interact together, why it's important to talk about this, and why the words we choose matter. So I really encourage you to kind of write down any questions, thoughts, notes, ideas throughout the presentation, jot it down, put it in the chat. We're hopefully going to get to all of the answers or case questions during the question and answer portion. So that way everybody has a voice or an option to be heard during this presentation. So what is mental illness? According to the DSM-5, most of the mental illnesses that are here or that you are maybe familiar with need to have or cause clinical significant distress or impairment in some area or aspect of life. So a lot of times people want that diagnosis or for whatever reason. And we'll talk about that in a little bit but if it doesn't cause that significant daily impairment or distress, it's not enough of a clinical reason for that diagnosis. So the evaluating team, the psychologist, the neuro team for the medical diagnostic, if it's not causing that significant impairment or stress, it's not considered to be a DSM diagnosis of a mental illness. And so some of these mental illnesses are manageable, while some are absolutely completely debilitating. Some of these mental illnesses do coexist and do work well with psychiatric medication, and some other specific diagnoses are actually pushed towards the medication management by psychiatrists because that medication chemical piece is sometimes really the missing link of the puzzle for connecting the therapy, the tools to making that person have a successful future. So each family I've ever met in personal and professional history has a current or past mental health history. Not really shocking, considering we all deal with things in a different way, and we have lots of different family members from all over. So why is this something we've been avoiding? Why aren't we taught early on to better understand and work together as a family? A lot of these things are learned behaviors. An older child may be always giving in to a sibling when they're having a tantrum, or when there's an aunt who's having a manic episode at a holiday dinner. How do we respond? How do we react? How do we talk about it? How do we not feel that embarrassment, shame, and guilt? Modeling is lifelong learning. I'm going to continue with and follow up from our first Lunch and Learn, which was Well-Intended Parents, Unintended Consequences, when Dr. Renee Dominguez really reiterate and reinforce that modeling is lifelong learning. What you do, your child will do. What you say, how you react to stress, how you have a flat tire, how you handle the milk completely falling all over the floor, how you handle that situation is how they are going to see how you self-regulate, how you handle those situations, and what they do. So in this picture, there's a child who's yelling at the grocery store. We're not quite sure why, but as soon as we see our child yelling, that immediately puts us in a distress, and we're trying to defuse and manage the situation while people are staring at you in the grocery store. Maybe you're running late to pick up another child and people are staring at you and you're just not having the greatest day. You're probably not going to respond to that child in a calm, healthy, loving regulation and supported way. You're just, we got to get to the car. We're going here. We're late. So they're waiting for you and looking at you and how you react and respond to them in those stressful and distressing situations. Another example of the mother on the top left. The child is screaming and she's covering, oh gosh, that embarrassment. What is that child feeling in that situation? What's that perspective? That kid is learning that mom's embarrassed of me. I'm feeling that guilt, that shame. And maybe I'm going to engage in some more behaviors to get different attention from mom. If screaming and yelling doesn't work, I'm going to push it up to throwing, because that's going to get mom's attention, even if it's that negative attention in the way that I don't want. The daughter on the bottom right looks absolutely terrified. And she's also learning that the mom is yelling at her. This is how my mom treats me. This is how we communicate through aggression to get your point across, and how she's going to take those lessons learned from mother and use that in society with school, peers, friends, and her own family, and then yelling back at mom. How to talk with your child about feelings, building trust. Have these conversations from a very early age, 1 or 2 years old. Kids know basic feelings: mad, sad, upset. When somebody hurts them at the playground, when their ice cream falls, they feel those emotions, even if they don't know the word for it. So it's important to model, say, I'm feeling so excited, I'm sad, giving them those social emotional language and the vocabulary to identify those feelings. It teaches them to express and communicate their emotions appropriately. You're also demonstrating problem-solving skills and self-regulation skills. I'm mad. I'm going to do X, and an appropriate calming strategy. Creating that safe place. You need to be your child's stable, safe, emotional, calm connection place. Not always possible when we have heightened emotions, even if you don't like your child's decisions, behaviors, or choices. Depending on your child's comfort level and their support system, they may need different calming strategies, a hug. They might need to be left alone for a little bit before repairing that situation. Language matters. Why? Because all we have are our words and actions to show and demonstrate who we are on a consistent basis. The mental health stigma in history has always been negative. Past interventions have been considered forms of inhumane and torture, including lobotomies. Labels. So people are overdiagnosing themselves and want that mental health label now, where in the past it was very stigmatized and very negative. It was something not talked about. And now it's a bit of a shift in seeking out that label or that diagnosis. And maybe that societal piece of, oh, I have ADHD, everybody's got ADHD. But then there's other diagnoses like autism spectrum that is not so socially acceptable, socially sought out, because it has a different feel. So with the arrow there, if your child is wanting to have a neuropsych evaluation done, and if it's absolutely helpful to find out your child's areas of strength and deficits of things to work on. So what language can you use to support that? Hey, if you really feel that way, let's see what our options are. Let's go talk to some people. Let's make some appointments and let them, depending on the age of course, let them be a part of that process if that's something that is really important to them. The label does not really matter. It matters for insurance purposes. It matters for getting services, and it matters for the common language that most people use in the medical field. Same thing with different labels of diagnoses for sickness, the flu, strep throat, kind of those things too. So the label doesn't make or break you or define who you are. Communication techniques. So trying some of these styles, again, depending on the age of your children, depending on what's going on, trying some of these communication styles to have boundaries with your child and let them know that their choice or their behavior was not appropriate, like hitting a sibling, hitting you, and why. Explaining why. Kids want to know the reasoning behind everything. A 3-year-old will ask 300 times why throughout the day. They really just generally want to know. So explaining to your child, you're here for them, being empathetic. I'm sorry you're feeling that way. Being compassionate, listening to your child, actively finding out what's going on. Oh, ask open-ended questions. We don't know how they're feeling until we ask. And we also don't want to say, I know you're feeling this way, because then we're assuming that they feel that way and not giving them that opportunity to voice and self-advocate their own concerns. Difficult situations, which may include physical altercations, verbal aggressions, throwing things, meltdowns, crying, self-harm, and suicide. These are things that all make us feel really uncomfortable because we don't know how to react under pressure in those situations. We don't know what to say. We don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't know what to do. So when children are a little bit younger, it's easier to just scoop them up, put them in their room. It gets a little bit harder when they're fighting back. They're destructive. They are throwing things. They're physically aggressive at you and making that really hard. It's also hard when they're growing up and they're physically stronger and bigger. You can't just pick them up. And that also sends the message that if you're not going to comply, we're going to use physical aggression to take you over, which isn't a great message to send to your child. So really setting up these co-regulation skills and then in an independent self-regulation so that the child can get to a safe place with or without your help, with the least amount of resistance and aggression towards family members. Because it gets dangerous, especially after they are old enough or they're 18. You can't really engage in those physical altercations. Every single person in the house feels it. Whoever lives there, even the dog, even the cat. The tone of the home sets up the environment for successes or failures. After an episode, you might, as the parent or caregiver, you might need time to calm down. And that's okay. Use that language, use that narration. I'm still really shattered by this. I'm still really jolted. I'm going to take a break. Giving yourself those I statements, feeling that accountability and saying, this is what I'm going to do because I need to calm down and regulate before we talk about that. It depends on each child's age, situation, what's going on. It's important to definitely talk to, as the parent or caregiver, talking to all members of the family that were involved once they have all agreed to talk about the situation together. Use language that your kids understand. It's not okay that Johnny's hitting you. It's not okay. That's not right. And giving them the language they understand of what's going on in the situation. Making sure that you are respecting those parent-child boundaries, not taking sides with a child, or maybe belittling or using some of those negative qualities to say, hey, about another child. Talking with all kids involved when they're ready. Making sure that you are there for them, supporting and being that loving and positive caregiver. Making sure that each child knows that they are important and they're valued. Family expectations. No family is perfect. Every family goes through their own things. So family expectations, talk about family, what family means to you, especially when they're young. What is, have family dinners, family movie night, family game night. You can have family meetings and have it be very non-formal of just, hey, what are we going to make for dinner this week? What do we have going on? Just little things like that. Talk about boundaries, rules. What does it mean to be in this family? Different responsibilities. Mom makes the rules, but so does grandma. How do we navigate that? Sometimes dad's in the picture. Sometimes he makes the rules. Sometimes he doesn't. Set those expectations up. What are the child expectations? It's expected for you to pick up after yourself. Each family member can come to the meeting, family time, with their own concerns, with their own values of how they want to talk about what's important to them in the family. Let them know that this is a community. This is part of a family. There's a reason you're family, because you love each other, and how they can participate in each family members. Doing it all. Caregiver of the year. Your self-care is absolutely most important. If you are not at 100%, you cannot give to anybody, even at 1%. So making sure that you are engaging in self-care activities, whether it's a hot shower, whether it's a cup of coffee on the balcony alone when the kids are at school, asking for help from friends, from anybody. Hey, can we have a play date on this day? I really need a break. Or have a meeting, talking to other people that you can really help to have those support systems. Teaching your children how to manage their conversations through self-advocacy skills. Telling that sibling, I feel blank because blank. Giving them the tools and the resources to advocate for themselves, what they need, and also giving them the resources to create their own boundaries with different siblings and different peers, family members, and different relations with friends. I recently saw that the attention-seeking behaviors is a little bit reframed of the language to that connection-seeking behaviors, and that still kind of goes into that really nice wave of language we've been talking about. So the attention-seeking behaviors, when a child is, or anybody's engaging in attention-seeking behaviors, what's the ultimate goal? What are they looking for? They're trying to connect with somebody. So I really like how they rephrase that of a connection-seeking behavior, because that's what they're actually looking for. When someone's hurt from a parent or a sibling, they're doing something because they want that connection. We all want to feel unconditionally loved and accepted for who we are, even when we're in a time of crisis. Extended family. This absolutely really depends on who your family is, who your extended family members are, what your family dynamic looks like. I'm not going to pressure, force, make you have these difficult conversations with these family members if they are not in a mature enough place to understand what's really going on. And that's something that you can talk to about with your child's therapist, with your own therapist if you have one, getting a family therapist if that's something that is in your therapy plan, to how to address this with extended family members. If there's a child's depression and there's withdrawal behaviors and grandma's there, how do we talk to grandma about it? How do we, maybe not respond, or continuing to ask that child to join in, knowing that they're withdrawn? It might make them feel worse, or having that social anxiety. Maybe if there's a child, Julie, who goes to her room when she's upset, she knows this, she flips her sign, respecting other family members, that you have to respect that sign and she'll come out when she's ready for that hug. So it really just depends on your family, how much you want them involved, the family dynamics, and what language you want to tell them also. Asking for help with your family, specifically, hey, I need you to pick up Scott from soccer tomorrow. Can you go to his game? Something specific that family members can help with. Reinforce that family plan. Hey, this is what we do when Julie's mad. She goes to her room, she puts her sign on that says, I need some space. We let her have her space. Your family's for a reason. So really support and encourage that loving, positive energy from family members. And you don't have to tell family members anything. It's totally up to you. Suicide and self-harm. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Suicide and self-harm is a very controversial topic, and it goes along with that stigma about what do we say, what do we do, how much do we talk about it, how much do we not. I don't want to talk about it and give them more ideas and give them more plans, but we need to talk about this, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable as a family member, as a parent. It's important to listen. If your child is in immediate danger to themselves or someone else, it's important to go to the nearest emergency room. When they are there, they will do a suicide assessment risk to see if that child, or depending on a close teen adult, will see if they are in immediate danger to themselves or others, to be admitted to inpatient for further support and treatment. If they do not meet that immediate need for inpatient admittance for them hurting themselves or somebody else, they will be discharged with a follow-up plan to see a therapist, a psychiatrist for medication possibly, and an outpatient clinic referral for that hospital facility. So listen to their ideas about their plan. Ask them, what were you gonna do? What's the plan? What was your backup? Don't judge or critique, even if it sounds really silly. And so talk to them about harm reduction. Harm reduction is an evidence-based practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with drug use. However, we can use this in a self-harm way to keep long-term damage and frequency of injury to a minimum rather than stopping that action completely. So it is an evidence-based practice that is very helpful in self-harming. Communication. I loved this picture of the wave coming because you can see it's about to happen. And there are lots of times where in life, in practice, in personal, I can see the fight about to happen. So when you or your child or anybody is in a heightened state of emotion, it's easy to get caught up in the waves of anger and emotion and let it lash out. It's easy to anger and blame and project onto others. Again, modeling. Again, what you need. Hey, I'm really mad right now. I'm going to take 15. It sounds really, really silly to practice these and prepare your statements and rehearse them, even with your child when you're in a calm, regulated state, so that in the moment, you'll be using that habit of those strategies and phrases. And in the moment, it won't seem so silly. It'll be like, wow, this was really awesome. I can't believe we did this. So keeping it those I statements, it feels that accountability, that responsibility, and you're in charge of your own body, your thoughts, and your actions. The repair piece. This is something that I have recently found that almost every single family struggles with, including my own. So we're all just human. And so this repair piece, a lot of parents don't practice this. So the generations have not had this opportunity to understand why this piece is so important. It's hard for people to admit when they're wrong and to apologize. If your child does not want to participate in the repair process, please do not mandate that. Anything that is mandatory from a parent or a caregiver is an instant rebellion, and they're not going to want to do it to your factor that they are told to do it. So encourage them to write down, if they're writing, why they don't want to participate in the repair. Maybe they're still angry. Maybe they're not ready, and that's okay. They can repair it on their own terms. What would make it feel better for them? Use handouts. The calm after the storm. Maybe it'll be a couple days. Maybe it takes a little bit of time. Try to limit how, you did this, you did that, those I statements. I felt really mad when this happened. A real apology. This is also something that I've seen in practice that a lot of people just, sorry. Okay, well, that's not real, because we still keep repeating the same behavior that we said we were sorry for 15 times. So making it a real apology, putting that words into action for the next time. So not only just saying you're sorry for what, but also making it up to that person, something that means something to them. If your little sister always likes to play dolls and you know that you don't like that, but you really need to make it up to her. Hey, I'll go play dolls with you, because I'm really sorry that I hurt your feelings yesterday. That would be making it up for them. So talking about it differently next time, putting those words into action so that you can change your behaviors. Some resources, the Smart Love book, which is a really great framework for kind of changing that language for that loving, regulating child, and how to kind of just change some of that language on discipline, boundaries, rules. The Parallel Process to go alongside with your teen that is in treatment is a great resource. The ripple effect of mental illness and how it affects the person, the family, the community, and really ultimately the world. We take our family baggage with us when we go to work, when we go to see our friends, when we go to our jobs, and how that really ties into everybody around the world. So these are some of visuals that I use frequently, often and daily in my practice. What size problem is it? To really help adults, parents and children to kind of reframe what size problem is it, how those big reactions should match the size of the problem, and then also getting them to look at that other perspective, taking a step back to see what problem size it is, increasing the feeling awareness of anxiety, but understanding what is coming underneath that anxiety sometimes. The body thermometer on the left is the body regulation thermometer. So having kids identify what zone they're in. Every zone is fine. And I like to use these because they're from the Inside Out movie with the really distinguishable emotional characters. And then that wiggly body is that really purple zone, because sometimes it's a fine line between wiggly to anger. So that's a really great one for kids that, or maybe even teens, adults that are struggling with that kind of high arousal of energy and kind of needing to know when to bring it back down. On the right is a triangle of emotions, which is a visual representation of cognitive behavior therapy, how your thoughts are in charge of your feelings and your actions, and how you have the power to change all of that, which is what therapy really is. The angry iceberg. This is very helpful for people to, anger is the first thing that we see because it's such a strong emotion, but what else is underneath there? I'm mad that Susie hit me, but I'm also really hurt. I'm mad that so-and-so did this, but I'm actually really scared. On the right, those automatic negative thoughts, which are really helpful resources to identify those cognitive distortions that many of us have all the time or sometimes throughout the day, which is a really great helpful tool for those ruminating thought processes and anxiety. This is a week sheet, which is I use often for parents, and I modify it for kids to really be accountable, responsible. What happened this week? I don't know. Okay, well, what's actually going on? Write it down. What's the date? What was my reaction size? For parents, what did I say? What did I want to say? What was that my intention? So when we take a step back, put it on paper, we're really going back to see what we did in the moment, because it happens so quickly that we're not really aware of our actions and feelings. So hopefully this was a lot of information at once, but we were able to summarize kind of why it's really important to talk about mental health from an early age, early on in the family, some of the different strategies and skills that you can do as a parent or caregiver to set that framework for a positive language aspect for them to create a positive, loving, regulating home that everybody gets upset at points. How do we express that? How do we repair it and make it better?
Thank you so much, Kelly. That was a lot of information.
It's a lot of information.
And we really appreciate it. Okay. I do want to make sure that during this part of our event, we take some of the skills and information that you share with us and push it out just a bit further into our extended families. I think those of us who have a child or a family member struggling with mental illness often find it very difficult to take some of those things that you share with us today that we're already working so hard to implement and use them effectively with siblings, grandparents, aunties, whomever it might be. And a number of the questions we have address that. So maybe we'll just dive right in and see where the conversation takes us. How do you know how much to share with the other child or children about what's going on without violating the privacy of the kid who's struggling? Is it advisable to have the conversations with both the kids in the room or all the kids in the room?
That is a great question. So, and a lot of these are, it all depends on the situation, the kids, the age, what's actually happening. So, it can be really beneficial to have all parties involved to repair it, to talk about it, to go over what happened, addressing it as, hey, Johnny, I felt really scared when you were hurting your sister. And that really, so it can be a really positive experience, but it has to be done in the right way, using the right language and making sure that nobody's feeling attacked. So it's one of the, like, a lot of these are all depending on situations, ages, child maturity level, when they're calm and ready to talk.
So to go back to kind of where you started the webinar today.
Felt really uncomfortable. I don't want my kids hurt.
I'm not sure if everyone's experiencing this or not.
Yeah, it's freezing.
Kelly, you have frozen on the screen, and I'm not sure if you can still hear me or not. It might be a good idea for you to try to get off and rejoin the webinar. There you are again. And now you're, yeah.
Now I got kicked out. There we go.
Okay, there you go. Okay, thank you. Did you have to rejoin us? Is that what happened?
I think I got kicked out, or
Okay.
You froze, and then I think I got kicked out, but I'm back.
Okay, I think we're back though. The joys of webinars.
So it really depends on the age, the situation. Depending on it, that's a great, it would be great to talk to all parties involved. So it really just kind of depends on that situation.
So I guess what I had started to ask you when you froze was, we always talk about the importance of talking about mental health, talking about mental illness. It allows us to normalize it. It allows us to feel as though it's, less scary, less stigmatized. And I guess the question, just to push it a bit farther, is, do we avoid, if Joey, my older brother, is diagnosed with depression and anxiety, do we avoid talking about that with someone who's 6? Or do we say to someone who's 6, your brother's struggling with some stuff in his mind, or however you might put it, you're the professional there. And then there was a question also that came in the chat. Do we talk to a sibling who's away at college, who worries? How much do we share with them about what's happening at home? Mm-hmm. And I know these are complicated questions and different, but when do we start, and how often, and how much?
I would start as early as possible, honestly. Even with that 6-year-old Joey struggling with anxiety and depression, we don't know what, we could teach a 6-year-old what that anxiety and depression means, but what's an appropriate language? Yeah, my older brother sometimes worries a lot. Okay, so sometimes when he worries, he does XYZ, and he sometimes feels really sad. Okay, well, I can notice those things and how siblings can be attuned to their other siblings. Hey, if my brother is sad and he's crying in his room, I know that maybe he needs some space, or maybe he does want me to connect with him. So we can absolutely have those conversations at a young age and giving them the right language to use. If the child's in college and there's some things going on at home, that's tough too, because how much do you want them to be exposed or know about? But then if you don't, they're going to feel like they've been left out. They've been feeling tricked. They're not a part of the family anymore. But we don't want them to worry because they're dealing with their own set of stuff, but they're still a part of this family unit. So it is important to, if they're checking in, hey, how are things going? Well, Joey's really having a hard time this week at home. And maybe depending on that teen college relationship too with the younger sibling, maybe they can make some positive strategies on how they can connect, even though they're far away at college.
So I don't know if anyone in the audience shares this experience, but I know when I was at the beginning of my journey parenting my daughter who has mental health challenges, I wanted to shield or protect my extended family from what were some pretty difficult periods and some difficult times at my house. In retrospect, I wonder whether or not that was a good choice or not. And one of the questions that comes in is sort of along these lines. Do you have some words to help us talk to grandma or other family members about mental illness struggles in our kids without sharing too much, but still giving them a good idea about what we're actually struggling with every day and the severity and stress around parenting or having someone in your home with mental illness?
Mm-hmm. That is tough too. So, and it also depends on who these grandparents are. Are they open to mental illness talks? Are they, where are they on their level of awareness and acceptance too? So, talking to grandparents, and it depends on if you want to use that diagnostic language of, Susie has anxiety. She's been struggling a lot, or, things at home are really tough. Because if you're talking to a parent, they can pretty much pick up on the tone of voice that you're using with them if things are stressful at home. So they might already be kind of knowing that things are a little bit rough at home, but not knowing those details or why. And if you don't want to feel or feeling comfortable sharing those things are really tough right now. Things are really difficult. You can use, any kind of language you want that is, feels okay for you, feels comfortable, and doesn't open up that vulnerability to that criticism or judgment of their reaction or response. So you can, just be as honest and include as much or as little details as you want of things are really tough right now. It's really hard, and you can explain why. You don't have to, but depending on the relationship that you have with those grandparents or extended family.
So I guess I hear you saying that it's not really our job to spread the word about mental health or help to normalize mental health when we're in the throes of it if we don't feel comfortable. I mean, I guess I'm sort of imagining, like, how do I stay close to my mom or my grandma or my, great aunt if they really have zero idea what it is that I'm living every day? And how do I then bridge that, what has become a large gap, because I'm not parenting a normal kid or a kid who appears normal? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I don't want to not talk about that mental health aspect, because it is really important, but depending on the generations of where their acceptance is on that mental health, and how supportive are they going to be, or being very direct. I need this kind of a support, or I want to tell you something, but I know it's kind of something that's hard to talk about, and I don't know what your reaction is going to be. And then kind of bridging that gap in conversation of, this is really important and this is affecting our family, and it's important that I tell you, and this is why. And why that child, because it is important to put that mental health out there. But then some people, depending on family members, they're very closed off, or that they hear a word and then they just assume that because they have ADHD, they're going to be bouncing off the walls, or anxiety, or, they just assume those things. So how is that stigma or that label of mental health kind of counterproductive to that child specifically, because it's not just that child?
I like that idea of saying, of sort of preempting by saying, this is difficult for me to talk to you about, and I realize it might be difficult for you to hear.
Yes.
I think that's great advice, but we need to talk about it anyway, because this is what's happening in my own home.
Right.
And then you're also pushing it one more step to say that you're like, to ask for specific supports. Yeah, I think that's very good advice.
Same thing with grieving. People, when there's a loss, oh, I'm here for you. Well, people don't know what to do. So you have to be real specific when there's a loss too, of like, I need you to, fold the laundry. Hey, I need you to, pick up Scott after soccer practice, and then just kind of talk about the day and maybe just talk to him. How is his soccer practice? How is that? What kind of supports can they give for Scott after soccer practice? It's really hard. He's got social anxiety. Maybe not asking too many questions about it, or open-ended questions, and letting him come to grandparents to explain what's going on.
We have some other questions here, but this conversation leads me to want to follow that by asking you, what do you think the best response is when a friend, for example, says to you, so is your daughter all better? How's that anxiety going? Is she better now? What's the best way to respond to someone when you know that you're kind of in the throes of a chronic illness, mental illness, that's going to take
Doesn't go away
her lifetime to learn to live with? Like, what are some good words to use when you're trying to respond to someone who thinks it's kind of like a broken arm?
Yeah. So, and that's tough too, because, depending on who this are they all better? Are they fixed? Well, and let's say it is anxiety. Well, you can kind of give her that person a little bit of that mental health, psychosocial education. Well, anxiety isn't something that goes away. You kind of deal with it forever. So, right now she's in a great place, got some strategies. Thanks for checking in, reassure them. Hey, thanks for asking about her. That's, thanks for checking in. It means that you really do value our friendship, our relationship, and want to know how my family is doing. And thanks for checking in because I know you know how tough it's been at home. So, thanking that person, but then also saying, well, it's not giving a little bit of that education piece without sounding too pushy or too, well, actually, mental health is a lifelong thing, and kind of giving them that soapbox, but just, actually her anxiety, it's a really great week and we're on a new medication, also depending on how much information you want to share. And then, kind of following it up with thanks for checking in. Like, it's been a rough week. It's been great. So giving some of that mental health piece of education, but then also, letting them know I'm appreciating you checking in on us.
Here's one question we've got, Kelly. My son, somehow I have something in front of it, so I can't read it. My son, who is struggling with anxiety, lashes out and is sometimes aggressive and scares my daughter. Mm-hmm. How can I help to build connection between my kids?
So that's a great question too, of if he's lashing out for anxiety, how can they build a connection? Depending on how old they are, what do they have a common interest in? Do they have any common interests? Do they have things that they like to do together? Depending on the ages too, can they do something, family activities? Building a fort is a great one, especially when it's cold out, pretty old school activities, building a fort, going on a bike ride, doing things together with them. And then also making sure if, he is hurting the other daughter or she's feeling scared, what activities does she like? Getting him involved. And, if he is kind of hurting her in those situations, that repair piece of, okay, maybe if the sister wants to do this, I will do that with her. So we're repairing that relationship too. So finding activities together.
It seems like doing that also reminds the sibling that your sibling's mental illness diagnosis or your sibling's struggles are not all of who they are. It's just part of who they are. Yes. So they can still build a fort. They can still play Tinker Toys or go for a bike ride with you, even though sometimes they're scary or their actions are frightening.
Or sometimes Johnny gets really mad and he has a big reaction to a small problem. Like, we can normalize that. Like, mom says, I have big reactions. Sister says, sometimes I do too. Like, remember that time? So then we normalize it and say, okay. And then, be supportive of that. Hey, Johnny, maybe next time, like, do this so you can have a smaller reaction, or go to your calm down spot so you don't have a big reaction. So getting those sister or the siblings support too in that, but also a fine line of not being that motherly figure, having that sibling like tell them what to do, because then it kind of backfires.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the next question is one that we at Catch talk about a lot in our Parents Connect groups, at our coffee talks. We talk about it amongst ourselves. I've talked about it with my sister. So it's an important one, I think. What do I say to the relative who is judging my parenting of a child with mental illness?
That's a good one, because there's always going to be eyes looking on you for whatever you're doing or not doing, whether it's parenting, whether it's picking out the wrong food at the grocery store. People are always going to be judging. And again, depending on that relationship, you have to create boundaries for yourself with your own family members too, of setting those boundaries up. If, they say like, oh, you're doing this, this, and this. Well, once again, thanks. I appreciate what you appreciate your feedback. I appreciate you, concerned about us, but we're living in this on a day-to-day basis, and this is our family plan, and this is kind of what we've worked on. We'd be happy to explain it to you if that person's mature enough to have this conversation, or are they singled into, you're doing this wrong because you're not doing it the way that mom did it. So it depends on who that person is. Are they mature enough to have that conversation? And then putting up your boundaries to say, yes, thanks for, checking in, but actually this system works for our family in this way, and we're going to work with it, and we're going to continue with this. I'm
going to push you just a little bit
Okay.
on, I know a number of times you've reminded us that it's important to understand where our family member is in their understanding of mental health and mental illness. And that should in some way sort of dictate how comfortable we are or how much we share. But I'm wondering if it's not worth exploring, I need to share this anyway, regardless of how ready or open you are, because this is my truth. My truth is, we have a plan. We're working with a team. We're trying to figure out what's best for our kid. We're trying to help them learn to live with this. You've got to hear this. And then it's kind of on you. Is that too harsh? How does that sit with you, Kelly?
I love that, because there are some family members that need to hear that bluntly and directly. And so there are family members that are still in the dark, or they don't want to know this. They don't want to be exposed to that. So for those family members, it is really important to stand your ground. If they're not ready to have that conversation or to respect it, then we get that approach of, this is really important. I know you don't agree. I know you have your differences, but this is our family. This is the way we're parenting, and this is the way that we're handling our family. And I know that's hard to hear because we are family still, but this is what we're living with. And you're experiencing something different in your house, just like we're experiencing something different in our house too. And giving them that information. It's going to be hard for them to hear, to process, to understand, but it actually might feel a huge relief finally saying it to those family members that have been real hard-headed or stubborn or don't want to listen or don't want to participate in your family plan.
Is it important to protect our kids from family members who are not ready, or is it important to just say, buck up, buddy, here we go, grandma's coming over, and whatever happens, we'll deal with it after?
That's a great question. So as the parent, I would definitely protect that child, but then also give them and say and teach them those self-advocacy skills in front of grandma. So if grandma comes in and makes a comment, you can say to grandma, hey, grandma, thanks for something, like, oh, he's got something like that. So giving, buffering, being that buffer and showing grandma that you are the protector of your child, but then also giving them the language to say, hey, grandma, actually, Johnny's doing whatever. And then so that way, when grandma comes the next day, he can use those self-advocacy skills when grandma is maybe saying something like, your ADHD is just too much. Hey, grandma, come on, so then he has something prepared to say to grandma.
So kind of modeling language for your kid. Again, back to that modeling piece.
Yep. That modeling piece of protection.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple more questions here, Kelly. My daughter refuses to talk about things after there's been a fight or issue between her and her sister. Any ideas for how I can get her to talk about what's happened?
So depending on the age too, maybe writing it out, maybe journaling it. If she doesn't feel comfortable talking to you as the parent about what's going on between her and her sister, what about is there another parent in the house that she might feel more comfortable talking to about it? Does she, feel comfortable journaling, drawing about it, maybe writing the sister a note also, and just having the sisters communicate that way? So there's lots of different ideas or play therapy, sand therapy. They can try different ideas for just pretend play. A lot of time, depending on the age too, the pretend play will usually come out how that child is feeling, or, different strategies, or how they can interact with something and then kind of talk about it to resolve that situation together.
So you're suggesting that sometimes actually talking about it or having a discussion is just too difficult, but like
Very much so.
writing about it or drawing or sending a letter might be a way of opening the door of that communication.
Yes. Some kids aren't ready to talk about it. Even the little ones, even the older ones, if they're not ready to talk about feelings, how else can they express that? Through art, through movement, through dance, through, pretend play. How else can they express their emotions, what they're feeling in a different way rather than just verbally talking about it?
Thank you.
No problem. Hopefully that helps.
Well, this is great conversation. We really appreciate your insight.
This is great.
My parents are old-fashioned
Mhm.
and don't understand my son's depression and ADHD. They think I'm doing things wrong. When we are together, they want good behavior and are intolerant of his bad behavior. How can I salvage a relationship between them and my son? And frankly, mine too.
So that's a great question. So that goes back to that language piece. Even parents who are old school, like using good and bad, let's take those words out of the equation. There is no good, there is no bad. There is just, child Ben. So sometimes Ben feels a little bit sad, and that's okay. Grandparents, what can we do when Ben's feeling sad? How can we notice it? How can we be there to support him? Instead of saying, oh, that's a bad behavior, or that's expected versus unexpected. So taking that good and bad piece out of the language for parents and grandparents to use rather than what's expected and unexpected. So that's kind of a language piece there. But then also telling those grandparents how that's going to be tough because they're old school grandparents of this really impacts him. How, and teaching them about that good and bad language piece of when you say he's being bad, then that's just that negative stigma stereotype that he's reinforcing and not doing anything. And then if he's doing something good, then, that's what they want. That's what we want to see. But also, telling that, how did that feel for you as the child to be living with them as parents? Probably another hard conversation because we've never had that conversation with our parents of, I didn't like the way you parented me and this is why, and this is what I'm doing instead. So they might get pretty upset about that or defensive because they thought their parenting was great. And that's why we're here to kind of stop those cycles of parenting and how to parent different. So taking that language piece and then also addressing or having, depending on how old this child is, that self-advocacy modeling, hey, grandma and grandpa, when we're with Ben and you put these expectations on him, he's feeling, already failing of, oh, grandma and grandpa are coming, I'm bad. They don't want to see me. They only want to see me when I'm good. And that just kind of creates that low self-esteem, low confidence of just deteriorating of, self-esteem. I don't want to go see grandma and grandpa then. And so maybe, letting him know, but then also what things can grandma and grandpa do with him that he really likes to do too. And giving him those borders, boundaries, and expectations of, hey, grandma, it really bothers me when you say that I'm bad. It really hurts my feelings. And then having him talk to grandma about it, because I wonder if that conversation's different.
So standing in your power as a parent and what you've decided is a way to sort of regain your relationship with them and to say,
yes,
this is me, this is us.
Yes, which is hard to do as an adult child.
Right.
It's very hard to do as an adult child when you have children, and then also in that sandwich generation of they are constantly judging you for your parenting techniques when maybe theirs were also a little questionable, and now you're noticing it and doing it differently. And then there's that power struggle of who's right, who's wrong. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We're just going to do things a little bit differently because child Ben needs a little bit different supports than I did as a kid.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kelly, we have come to the end, but we do have time for one more question.
Okay.
And then we will wrap things up. My niece has OCD, and I don't always think my sister is handling the situation well. What can I say in the interest of my niece? Also, I'm worried she isn't getting the help and the support that she needs.
It's a great question. So also for that, how old is your niece? What kind of relationship do you have with your niece? Do you talk to her about her OCD? Does she talk to you? And that's a great, and supportive relationship too. And your sister, ask her about their family plan, in a smooth approaching way of, hey, I noticed that Alicia, I saw this. How's she doing? Is she, depending on what mom's plan is, ask them about their family plan. What things are getting better for her, what things are getting worse. It's tough when you're on the outside and you see some of those struggles, but don't know how to say it or approach it. You can ask those open-ended questions. How is she doing? Or asking to spend some time with her directly and to talk to her about it. Is she seeing a therapist? And you can ask mom, or especially if it's that sister, you can ask her, how is her therapy going? What can I even ask her? What kinds of things are you working on in therapy? To find out, a little bit more about the situation, or, what kind of stressors that you see that she's struggling with.
And maybe this is a good situation where you can ask what things you can do specifically
Yes.
to help your sister out. And maybe that will then give you a little into being more supportive, or being more a part of things. Because it is a delicate line there, I think.
It is, because it's like, okay, how, do I say, how is, Alicia doing without checking in? I'm not the parent, I'm the aunt,
Right.
but I'm also there. And depending on how old Alicia is, if she's communicating with the aunt, texting, hey, it's been a rough week at school or whatnot, then, how much do you share with your sister about how is she communicating with you or reaching out? So they're all kind of tough situations, and they all really depend. They're all very variable.
So try to be aware of yourself and the people with whom you're interacting, and keep talking.
Yes, self-awareness.
All right, well, we have come to the end of this Lunch and Learn. Kelly Scafidi, thank you so very much
for
being
having
a guest. It was such a pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming. We'll make the recording available to all of you, and share Kelly's resources, and join us again.